The email came in at 11:47 p.m. on a Wednesday. A patient at the University of Chicago site was hospitalized for grade 3 pneumonitis. Day 42 on veliratinib, Meyer Osei, Arventa Global, clinical trial manager. The 15-day clock started at 11:47 p.m. That's the FDA regulatory deadline for reporting an unexpected serious adverse event related to the investigational drug. 15 calendar days from the date, the sponsor becomes aware of the event. A serious adverse event is any adverse event that results in death, is life-threatening, requires hospitalization, causes persistent disability, is a congenital anomaly, or is medically significant. Pneumonitis requiring hospitalization is a serious adverse event. Is it unexpected? Yes, pneumonitis is not listed in the investigator brochure as a known risk of veliratinib at this severity level. Is it related to veliratinib? That's the medical monitor's assessment, possible, given the timing and the known class effect of kinase inhibitors on lung inflammation. Unexpected plus serious plus possibly related equals a SUSAR suspected unexpected serious adverse reaction. That triggers expedited reporting to FDA, to all active IRBs, and an updated investigator brochure if this represents a new safety finding. The DSMB gets the blinded safety data at their quarterly meeting Thursday. They see pneumonitis rate by arm without knowing which arm is which. They will assess whether this is a safety signal. Agentforce pharmacovigilance integration captures SAE narratives, routes them to the medical monitor, and tracks reporting timelines against the regulatory clock. Serious adverse event, regulatory definition and reporting obligation. An adverse event is any unfavorable medical occurrence in a participant in a clinical trial, whether or not considered related to the investigational drug. A serious adverse event, SAE, is an adverse event that meets one or more of the following criteria. Results in death, is immediately life-threatening, requires inpatient hospitalization or prolongation of existing hospitalization, results in persistent or significant disability or incapacity, is a congenital anomaly or birth defect, or is medically significant, a medical event that may not immediately result in the above outcomes, but that, based on appropriate medical judgment, may jeopardize the patient and may require medical or surgical intervention to prevent one of those outcomes. The sponsor must ensure that all SAEs occurring in enrolled patients, whether or not related to the study drug, are collected, documented, and assessed within the timelines specified in the protocol. Sites are typically required to report SAEs to the sponsor within 24 hours of awareness. The sponsor then has regulatory reporting obligations that vary by the SAE's characteristics. SUSAR, the highest urgency safety report. A suspected unexpected serious adverse reaction, SUSAR, is a specific category of SAE that triggers the most urgent regulatory reporting obligations. A SUSAR is an SAE that is serious, meets the SAE definition, unexpected, not described in the current investigator brochure with the observed frequency or severity, and suspected to be related to the investigational drug. The medical monitor's causality assessment is at least possible. Under FDA regulations, 21 CFR 312. 32. SUSAR must be reported to FDA within 15 calendar days of the sponsor's awareness, or within 7 calendar days for fatal or immediately life-threatening SUSAR. In the European Union, EMA requires SUSAR reporting within 15 days, or 7 days for fatal/life-threatening events, to the national competent authority in each EU member state where the trial is conducted. For a global Phase 3 trial like Clarity 301, a single SUSAR may trigger simultaneous regulatory reports to FDA, the EMA, PMDA, Japan, and multiple EU national authorities. A coordinated reporting effort that requires the pharmacovigilance team to work across time zones and regulatory systems. The investigator brochure, the living safety document. The investigator brochure, IB, is the document that compiles all available preclinical and clinical information about the investigational drug, including its chemical/physical data, pharmacological properties, clinical pharmacokinetics, and the safety data from all prior clinical studies. The IB is submitted to FDA with the IND and must be updated whenever significant new safety information becomes available. When a SUSAR is identified that represents a previously unrecognized risk, The IB must be updated to include this new safety finding, and the updated IB must be distributed to all active investigator sites and IRBs. An IB update may also trigger a consent form amendment. If the new safety finding represents information that a prospective participant would want to know before deciding to enroll, the ICF must be updated to reflect it, requiring IRB re-review and, in many cases, notification and reconsent of currently enrolled participants. The DSMB safety package, blinded safety surveillance. At each DSMB meeting, the sponsor's data management team prepares a safety data package, a compilation of safety data across all enrolled patients. For blinded trials, the DSMB receives unblinded data with treatment arm assignments, while the sponsor receives blinded safety data without arm assignments. The DSMB safety package includes a listing of all SAEs by patient, event type, severity grade, using CTKey common terminology criteria for adverse events, and outcome, summary tables of adverse event rates by system, organ class, and preferred term, SUSAR listings, deaths and their causes, dose modifications and discontinuations due to adverse events, and any safety-relevant laboratory or vital sign findings. The DSMB reviews this package and assesses whether the safety profile of the investigational drug warrants modifying the trial, adding safety monitoring assessments, reducing the dose, restricting the eligible population, or stopping the trial if an unacceptable safety risk is identified. The CTM's role in DSMB meeting support includes preparing the operational components of the safety package, coordinating with the independent statistician who unblocks the data for the DSMB, and implementing any DSMB recommendations that have operational implications. Site-level SAE management, the clinical research coordinator's role. For the sites participating in Clarity 301, the clinical research coordinator, CRC, is the first point of contact for SAE reporting. When a patient on study is hospitalized, the CRC must notify the principal investigator, complete the SAE report form with the full clinical narrative, onset date, severity, clinical course, treatment received, outcome, assess relatedness and expectedness in consultation with the PI, and submit the SAE report to Pinnacle's safety team within the protocol-specified reporting window, typically 24 hours for serious, immediately life-threatening, or fatal events. The CRC must also ensure that the SAE is documented in the patient source record, that any required protocol-specified assessments, additional blood draws, imaging, biopsies are performed, and that the SAE is recorded in the EDC. Incomplete or delayed SAE reporting is one of the most common GCP deficiencies identified in FDA inspections and in monitoring visit reports. It is also one of the most consequential, because delayed SAE reporting to FDA can result in a clinical hold on the IND. Every data point in Clarity 301 that reaches FDA started as a coordinator entering a value into a field on a screen. The journey from source document to regulatory submission is longer than most people realize. Meyer Osei, Arventa Global, Clinical Trial Manager. Clarity 301 uses an electronic data capture system, EDC, metadata rave. Every visit, every lab value, every adverse event, every dose administration, every imaging assessment is entered by the site coordinator in real time. The EDC is not a database of record. The source document is. The EDC contains the transcription. The source document, the patient's chart, the lab report, the radiology read, is the original. Queries fire automatically when data is missing, out of range, or inconsistent. A hemoglobin value of 1, 2G/DL triggers a query. Is that a transcription error? A date of progression entered before the date of the CT scan that identified the progression triggers a query. Is the sequence correct? Sites have 21 days to respond to queries under our data management plan. Our outstanding query count is a performance metric. High outstanding queries at a site mean either data quality problems or coordinator bandwidth problems. Both are my concern. Database lock planning started 6 months before our last patient's last visit. Data cleaning milestones, central laboratory data reconciliation, imaging data lock, SAE reconciliation. Lock happens when the data is clean, not before. The statistical analysis does not begin until the database is locked. Agentforce data quality dashboards surface outstanding queries, data entry lag, and lock readiness status across all 45 sites. Electronic data capture, the operational infrastructure of the trial. Electronic data capture, EDC, systems are software platforms that allow clinical trial data to be entered, managed, and transmitted electronically, replacing paper case report forms, CRF. Metadata Rave, Oracle Inform, and Viva Vault EDC are among the most widely used systems in Phase 3 oncology trials. The EDC system is configured before the first patient is enrolled, with each data collection field, visit schedule, and validation rule built according to the protocol and the data management plan. Access is controlled. Site coordinators can enter and edit data in their site's records. CRAs can review but not edit data, unless correcting a transcription error with full audit trail documentation. Data managers can run queries and review data quality reports. The sponsor and CRO can access aggregate data for operational monitoring. Every action in the EDC, data entry, modification, query response, signature, is captured in an audit trail that records who performed the action, when, and what the previous value was. The audit trail is a regulatory requirement and cannot be modified or deleted. It is reviewed by FDA inspectors as evidence that data has not been altered improperly. Source data verification, the connection between EDC and source documents. Source data is the original information from which the trial data in the EDC is transcribed. Patient medical records, laboratory reports, pharmacy dispensing records, imaging reports, and vital sign measurements taken at the study visit. Source data verification, SDV, is the process by which a CRA compares the data in the EDC against the source documents to confirm that the transcription is accurate and complete. The principle underlying SDV, if it's not in the source, it didn't happen, reflects the regulatory requirement that trial data must be traceable to a verifiable source. Fabricated or falsified data that appears in the EDC without a corresponding source document, or where the source document was altered to match the EDC rather than the reverse, is research misconduct and can result in criminal prosecution and FDA debarment. Under risk-based monitoring, 100% SDV has been replaced in many trials with targeted SDV focused on high-risk data elements. But the underlying requirement that EDC data must be traceable to source remains unchanged. Query management, the data quality dialogue. A query is a question generated by the data management team or the EDC system's validation rules, directed to the site, requesting clarification or correction of a data entry. Queries fall into several categories: edit check queries, generated automatically when data fails a validation rule, a value outside the expected range, a missing required field, an inconsistent date sequence. Manual queries, generated by the data manager or CRA after reviewing the data and identifying a discrepancy or ambiguity. And cleanup queries, generated at specific milestones in the database lock process to ensure all outstanding data issues are resolved. Sites are expected to respond to queries within a defined timeframe specified in the data management plan, typically 14-28 days. A query is resolved either by correcting the data, with an explanation in the audit trail, providing clarification, confirming that the original entry was correct, or documenting that the source document cannot be located, which may classify the data as missing. Outstanding queries, queries that have been open beyond the response window, are a data quality metric monitored by the CTM and reported in operational status reports. Data Management Plan, the operational blueprint for data integrity. The Data Management Plan, DMP, is a protocol companion document that specifies how data will be collected, managed, cleaned, and locked in the Clarity 301 trial. The DMP covers the EDC configuration, which data fields are collected at which visits, which fields are required versus optional, the validation rules that generate automatic queries, the data review process, how CRAs and data managers review data between visits and at milestones, query management procedures and timelines, the external data transfer plan, how laboratory data from the central lab, imaging data from the independent review facility, and patient-reported outcome data from electronic devices are transferred into the EDC, and the database lock procedure, the sequence of activities required to close the database for the primary statistical analysis. The DMP is agreed between the sponsor, the CRO, the data management vendor, and the biostatistics team before the trial begins, and is updated when significant protocol amendments affect data collection. Database lock, the operational prerequisite for statistical analysis. Database lock is the formal process of freezing the trial database in preparation for the primary statistical analysis. After database lock, no further data changes can be made, except to correct specific errors through a defined amendment process, ensuring that the statistical analysis is performed on a final, stable dataset. The database lock process for Clarity 301 involves completing all outstanding data queries, reconciling external data sources, central laboratory, imaging, patient-reported outcomes against the EDC, performing a final medical coding review, ensuring that all adverse events and medical history terms have been coded to the correct Med-DRA dictionary terms, conducting a final data review by the data management and medical monitoring team, and locking the database in a documented, auditable process. For a 312-patient Phase 3 trial with 5 years of follow-up data, database lock is a multi-month process involving the data management team, the CRO, the central laboratory, the independent imaging review facility, and the biostatistics team. The statistical analysis plan, already written and filed before lock, is executed after lock to generate the primary and secondary endpoint analyses. There is a group of people who know which Clarity 301 patients are on velaratinib and which are on docetaxel. I am not one of them. Meyer Osei, Arventa Global, Clinical Trial Manager. The Data Safety Monitoring Board, DSMB, is an independent committee. 3 oncologists, a biostatistician, a patient advocate. They are not Arventa employees. They are not on the Pinnacle team. They exist to protect the patients in this trial from a sponsor that has a financial interest in the outcome. The DSMB meets quarterly. They receive the unblinded safety data, adverse event rates by arm, serious adverse event listings, deaths. They compare. They assess. Is one arm experiencing unacceptable harm? Is there evidence of such overwhelming benefit that continuing to randomize patients to the control arm is unethical? Clarity 301 has pre-specified stopping rules written into the statistical analysis plan before the first patient enrolled. Futility. If the interim hazard ratio crosses the futility boundary, enrollment stops. Safety. If grade 4 or 5 toxicity rate in the velaratinib arm exceeds a defined threshold, enrollment stops. The DSMB can recommend stopping. Arventa's leadership reviews the recommendation. They accept it or explain in writing why they do not. The sponsor does not see the unblinded data. The firewall is structural, not voluntary. Agentforce DSMB meeting logistics, charter management, data package routing, recommendation tracking, DSMB composition and independence. A Data Safety Monitoring Board, DSMB, also called a Data Monitoring Committee, DMC, is an independent committee of clinical and scientific experts convened by the sponsor to monitor the safety and, in some cases, the interim efficacy of a clinical trial. For an oncology Phase 3 trial like Clarity 301, the DSMB typically includes clinicians with expertise in the therapeutic area, oncologists with NSCLC experience, a biostatistician who can independently interpret the interim data, and in some cases a patient advocate or bioethicist. DSMB members must be free from significant financial conflicts of interest with the sponsor, the CRO, and the investigational sites. They are typically compensated at fair market value for their time. The DSMB operates under a charter, a document agreed before the trial begins that specifies the committee's scope, meeting frequency, data access, voting procedures, and the pre-specified stopping rules they will apply. The DSMB independence is structural. They have access to data the sponsor cannot see, and their role is explicitly to represent the interests of trial participants, not the sponsor's drug development program. Stopping rules, pre-specified boundaries for safety and futility. Stopping rules are quantitative criteria, pre-specified in the DSMB charter and the statistical analysis plan, that define the conditions under which the DSMB will recommend early trial termination. There are 3 categories of stopping rules in Clarity 301. Safety stopping rules. If the rate of grade 4 or 5 adverse events attributed to the investigational drug exceeds a predefined threshold in the treatment arm, enrollment is suspended pending DSMB review. Futility stopping rules. If the interim efficacy data, typically expressed as the hazard ratio for the primary endpoint, crosses a pre-specified futility boundary, indicating that the drug is unlikely to demonstrate the target treatment effect even if the trial continues to full enrollment, the DSMB may recommend stopping for futility. And efficacy stopping rules. If overwhelming efficacy is demonstrated at an interim analysis, the treatment effect is so large that continuing randomization would be unethical, the DSMB may recommend stopping for efficacy, triggering early unblinding and submission. Stopping rules are mathematical functions, typically derived from group sequential statistical designs, O'Brien-Fleming, Pocock, or alpha-spending function approaches, that account for the statistical penalty of looking at the data multiple times. Unblinded data access, the information asymmetry between DSMB and sponsor. In a double-blind randomized trial, the sponsor and the investigators do not know which patients are on the experimental arm and which are on the control arm. This blinding is essential to prevent conscious or unconscious bias in trial conduct, safety assessment, and data interpretation. The DSMB is the only group that receives unblinded data. Treatment arm assignments are revealed to the DSMB statistician, who is independent of the sponsor's biostatistics team and the DSMB members, but not to the sponsor. This information asymmetry is by design. The sponsor receives blinded safety summaries showing overall rates of adverse events, serious adverse events, and deaths across the trial population, without arm assignments. The structural separation between the sponsor's data access and the DSMB data access is maintained through an independent statistician, typically at an academic medical center or independent biostatistics firm, who prepares the DSMB statistical report using unblinded data that never passes through the sponsor's systems. A sponsor who circumvents this firewall, for example, by receiving information that would allow inference of arm assignment, has compromised the trial's blinding integrity, which is a serious GCP violation. DSMB Charter, the governance document. The DSMB Charter is the foundational governance document that defines how the DSMB operates, written before trial initiation and agreed between the sponsor, the DSMB chair, and the independent statistician. The charter specifies the DSMB mandate, safety only or safety and efficacy, the frequency and format of meetings, typically quarterly, with an in-person meeting for interim efficacy analyses and teleconferences for routine safety reviews, data packages, what data the DSMB receives, how it is prepared, and who prepares it, the stopping rules and decision thresholds, the voting procedure, majority vote, supermajority, or consensus, the procedure for implementing DSMB recommendations, the sponsor's management reviews and accepts or formally rejects with written explanation, and confidentiality requirements. DSMB members must not disclose unblinded information to the sponsor, the investigators, or the public. The charter also specifies the procedure for ad hoc DSMB meetings, convened outside the regular schedule when a safety signal emerges that requires urgent review. An ad hoc meeting may be triggered by a cluster of unexpected serious adverse events, an external safety signal from a related compound, or a SUSAR that raises questions about the trial's risk-benefit profile. The CTM's role in DSMB operations. The CTM is responsible for the operational logistics of DSMB meeting support while maintaining the sponsor-side blinding firewall. The CTM coordinates preparation of the operational section of the DSMB data package, enrollment status, site performance metrics, deviation summaries, and blinded safety summaries, without access to the unblinded data that the independent statistician prepares separately. The CTM schedules DSMB meetings, coordinates travel and logistics for in-person sessions, ensures that the data package is delivered to DSMB members within the charter-specified timeframe before the meeting, and receives and documents the DSMB formal written recommendations. When the DSMB recommends a protocol modification, adding a safety monitoring assessment, adjusting dose modification guidelines, modifying eligibility criteria. The CTM is responsible for implementing that recommendation operationally, preparing a protocol amendment, notifying sites, retraining coordinators, and documenting the change in the TMF. The CTM is not present in the closed DSMB session where unblinded data is reviewed. The DSMB chair communicates the committee's recommendation to the sponsor through a formal written charter.